Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Inside Inter Miami. I'm your host, Andre Fernandez, Deputy Sports Editor at the Miami Herald, joined once again by our Inter Miami beat writer, Michelle Kaufman. Another action-packed jam show to go over this week, and it starts with a big payback win over Cincinnati for that Inter Miami squad. They wanted Cincinnati, they got Cincinnati, and you know what? They beat Cincinnati. We're gonna dive into the match and how it went well for Inter Miami, what worked. We're gonna talk about El Pistolero, Luis Suarez. You got it. He is on a roll right now, to say the least. Voted Player of the Week in MLS. He doesn't seem like he's 37 years old. We're gonna go over all of that. Drake Callender, Michelle spoke to him after the game, and he had his thoughts on El Pistolero, on the victory over Cincinnati, and what comes next for this team as they chase that MLS Cup, which, as we know, that's the trophy that they have left. We'll talk a little bit also about Tomas Aviles and the fact that he's got to cut down on these cards. He's leading the league in yellow cards. Not a good thing. You know, Drake himself had a great game. We'll go into that. We'll look at the standings. Of course, Miami leading the Supporters Shield race by an even bigger cushion now after that Cincinnati that kind of stiff-armed them a little bit. Now have an 8-point lead. And, of course, we'll have our weekly Lionel Messi injury update with some thoughts from Coach Tata Martino, as well as a look ahead to Chicago and more. And to start it off, let's go back to that victory, Michelle. That had to be sweet for this squad.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much talk going into that. This is the team that beat Miami 6-1 in July. So, pretty recently they beat 6-1, which was a strange game. When you look back at it, Inter Miami was missing 6 starters in that game, and they were big starters, key players. They're all key players, but they were missing, more than half their team. It was a completely different situation at Chase Stadium this Saturday. First of all, they had everybody there except Messi, which is a big except, but the team has learned to play without him. So they had pretty much everybody else there available. And wow, were they ready from the opening whistle? I mean, this team, they just came out of the gate on fire. They really did. They were at home. They wanted to avenge that 6-1 embarrassing game. And they knew that there's a chance to clinch a playoff spot at home. League's Cup is over. They could put that in the rearview mirror and focus now on what's ahead. And they came out like gangbusters. And in 31 seconds, Luis Suarez scored the first goal. In the 31st second of the game, people were still like, settling into their seats, coming in from outside. They had just finished the national anthem, and all of a sudden, what? Wait a minute, they scored already? They're ahead. And 5 minutes later,
People weren't done getting their arepas yet, and they hadn't even sat down yet. What the heck?
They hadn't even sat down. There were still a lot of seats where people were streaming in and chit-chatting, and all of a sudden he scores in 31 seconds, and then 5 minutes later scores again. So 2 goals in the first 6 minutes. Cincinnati was completely caught off guard at that point. They're now down 2-0, 6 minutes into the game. So Miami came out really strong. They looked very good. They were stringing really good passes together. They were fast. They were quick to the ball. They were winning the duels. Everything was going really well. And it actually looked like they probably were going to score more than 2. It looked at that point like we're looking at a rout. Maybe it's going to be 6-1 in the other direction this time. This is going crazy. And then, in the 42nd minute, Tomas Aviles, who, like you mentioned, we're going to talk a little more about it later, but he leads the league in yellow cards. He got his, second yellow card of the game in the 42nd minute. He had already had one in the 11th minute, and he gets tossed out of the game. So before halftime, they're already down a man, and they had to play down a man for about 60 minutes of that game. So they had to change into a more defensive stance. And, at that point, Inter Miami teams of the past would have probably collapsed, to be honest, and would have given up goals. But they managed to hang in there. They managed to play good defense. They managed to withstand whatever pressure Cincinnati put on them, and they pulled it out, and they won. They clinched. They're the first team this year. They're the first team in the playoffs, the first team with a little X next to their name in the standings. They're in the playoffs now, which is something that they couldn't say last year. They were second to last year, nowhere near the playoffs. They're now in the playoffs at the very least.
It might as well be 100 years ago, and it was like a different universe. It just does not even apply. It was so different before all of this came to fruition that it's just amazing. It's just amazing the way the transformation of this team and where they've gone from the depths that they were at to transcending sports of how big they've put together this phenomenon that they've put together right now. And Luis Suarez is speaking of amazing. I mean, at 37, for him to be doing, we were talking last week about is Messi breaking down physically because of the age he's at right now at this point in his career, all that. Look at Suarez. Suarez is unbelievable right now. I mean, this is
Yeah. And when he came in, remember that when he came in January, there were doubters and there were haters and there were people saying, this guy is taking injections in his knees. The guy cannot move. He's hobbling around. Last year in Brazil, he was complaining that he had to have injections before every game for the severe pain. There were a lot of people saying, this guy he's washed up. He's old. His knees are not going to be able to handle it. And the MLS is a much more physical league, as we had seen with Gonzalo Higuain, with all these guys who come and have to adjust to the new league. Joseph Martinez, everybody who's a little bit slower has trouble. And there was a lot of question about whether Luis Suarez was really a good pickup. And now nobody is saying that. Okay, the pistolero, he's got the gunslinger. He's got a lot of bullets left in that bag. He's got a lot of, it's unbelievable because when you watch him run, he really does still kind of hobble around and he looks like he has bad knees. But when there's an opportunity to score, he sprints, he makes good runs, he finds himself in the right positions, and then he is just a clinical finisher. He is a clinical finisher. And you have to ask yourself, those 2 goals that he scored, and it's no offense to anyone else, this guy's one of the best, in this era. But the other guys, the other forwards, if they are in the same exact position, they get the ball at their foot at the same exact spot, do they score those 2 goals in 6 minutes? Or is he just that good? I really think he is that good.
He is that good.
I really do.
Yeah, I do. He is that good. I mean, look, that's the one thing that, 37 or not, you still have that. You still have that. It's more the durability to set you up, the preparation, and being able to still get to the point where you can do those things. But that talent, that little, intangible, you have it. You just have it. Throughout your career.
And everyone was worried about his health. No one was really talking about Messi. Everyone's like, oh, Messi's going to be able to play a full season. He's going to have a full preseason.
Because he spoils everybody.
Discussion.
Yeah.
There was no discussion about his age, really, at this point.
It's kind of like Tom Brady in the NFL. Like until he retired, no one believed he was ever going to retire. Like it was just this myth, this mythical figure that you always believed was just going to be there in perpetuity
and be really good and all the time.
Really good.
And right. And in this year right now, Suarez leads the team right now. Suarez has scored 18 goals over all competitions and 15 in MLS, 14 or 15 in MLS. He has 18 overall competitions. He leads the team. He leads Gonzalo Higuain. He already broke the team record, with 8 games to go. And the playoffs. So he's just contributing in a huge way. His knees are somehow holding up, whether they're sore, whether they're not, I don't know. The guy is playing and he is still incredibly competitive, a little bit too much mouth still, he still argues with the refs a lot and, he gets a little bit agitated and I'm, he's another one who could maybe get too many cards one time, but so far, believe it or not, he's not one of the top players on Inter Miami for the most cards. So he's been having an incredible season. You got to give it up. He was named Player of the Week for the second time, and he's having an amazing season. He really is.
Maybe he gets a little more of that name respect. Kind of like when the big name players don't get called fouls as often, like in basketball. Maybe it's a little bit of that too.
Right, that does happen.
Yeah. But let's hear from, as we started last week, and we're gonna do throughout this show. Bringing you clips from Michelle's interviews over at either at post game or at practice. Let's hear from Drake Callender about El Pistolero himself.
It feels good. It feels good to have him contribute in that way. And he's come into the team, scored a lot of goals, been a playmaker. So for him to add 2 more goals to the tally tonight is massive for us.
Does he still surprise you? I mean, even at his age, and we've all seen what he's done in the past, does he still do things that surprise you at 37 years old?
I mean, that just shows his class, and it shows, you know, his intelligence and how smart he is as like a player. And for him to still competing at this level at his age shows just how much of a professional he is. So, yeah, I guess, yeah, he's just a really good player, and that's what he does. That's what he's done his whole career.
I know we're going to dive into the yellow cards and Tomas Aviles, but since we heard from Drake, why don't we talk real quick about Drake, because he is also performing really well in stepping up in these big games. I don't think, like, you and I both agree, sometimes it's so easy to get caught up with the big superstars that we don't realize the keeper is doing a good job too.
Yeah, and as always, always seems to be the case with goalkeepers. I could never be one, because they get blamed. When the team loses, everybody's down on the keeper. Oh, how did that, they let 3 goals in, and they blame the keeper when they miss. But when they continually, habitually save this team's butt, where yes, they won 2-0, but if he had not made those big saves that he made, it would have been a tie or it would have been a loss. You know what I mean? He made massive saves, more than 2 of them. So a lot of times we do take the goalkeeper for granted, and it's time to show Drake Callender some love on Inside Inter Miami. Drake Callender is the quiet leader of this team. He is a co-captain of this team. He wears a captain's armband when Messi's not there. He's a real quiet leader of this team. He's one of the few guys who doesn't speak Spanish. He's not in that whole Latin squad. He's the American quiet goalkeeper, Zen, California, cool, chill dude. But he is fierce on the field. He's really quiet and soft-spoken and very California when you talk to him. He's really sweet. His wife's expecting a baby in a few weeks, actually next week. The baby is due next week. I don't know what's going to happen if the baby comes a few days early and the game at Chicago is on Saturday. The baby is due the following week. So he's right in the final, I think in the 39th week or something. So he's a great guy, very soft-spoken, just super duper nice guy. But when he's in between those, in that goal net, he is fierce and he makes really big goals. And I do think that he deserves more credit for the success of this team. Everybody talks about Suarez. Everyone talks about Messi. Everyone is even talking about the other younger players, about Matias Rojas, about Diego Gomez, some of those players. And obviously Alba is an incredible player, Sergio Busquets. But let's not forget Drake Callender, the OG, the only guy left standing from the first team. He was here the first year. He was, one of the draft picks. He was on the second team. He wasn't even playing on the first team. And here he still is, saving them, making great plays time and again. And he just wrote a children's book, by the way, with DeAndre Yedlin. They just published a children's book that was unveiled last week. They had a little reading. He and DeAndre in Cincinnati at some elementary schools. So this is a guy who's successful on and off the field, a really good person, a leader, a role model, and he needs to get more attention than he gets.
Well, I know what's going to happen if the baby comes early. We're going to have CJ Dos Santos or somebody step in and beat Chicago for everybody. But, congrats to Drake, though, on several fronts, not just the baby, but his book, too. And great to see. What's not great to see, unfortunately, is all those yellow cards. So let's jump back on that topic real quick and talk about Tomas Aviles. How does he cut down on this? I mean, this could be a problem. You're right. This could be something to keep an eye on as this team, now a playoff team, heads closer and closer into that postseason.
Yeah, most of the stats, if you look at MLS season stats, team stats, Miami looks fantastic, okay? Miami leads the league with 58 goals. Miami, so they're the top scoring team. They're on top of the Supporters Shield. Like you said, they've stiff-armed now Cincinnati. They're 8 points ahead. All of this is great. The one area where they are not so great on the stat sheet is They are one among the most penalized teams in the league. There's only 4 teams that have more penalties than they do. So they're in 5th place in that, which is not something to be proud of. And Tomas Aviles is one of the reasons. He has 10 yellow cards and 2 reds over 22 games. That's basically 1 every 2 games, just about, that he's getting a yellow card 1 every 2 games, and twice has been ejected, including the game this past weekend. And Tata was asked about it. Is this something you're concerned about? And how do you correct this in a young player? He's 20 years old. He's one of the rising Argentine players that Tata was very excited to bring in. And Tata was asked, how do you correct that? And he said, look, keep talking to him. We're just going to keep talking to him. We don't want him to think we like his temperament. We like his aggressiveness. We like his temperament. That is what makes him such a good defender. We don't want to take that away from him. Tata said, when you have a player like that, you don't want him to play tentative. You don't want to take away his aggressiveness. You don't want to take away his personality. But he said he has to just learn when and where to do this, and not to foul, so blatantly and in dangerous places, and to get himself thrown out of a game. And when he's already playing on a yellow, if he gets a yellow early, he has to be extra cautious, obviously, going forward. They are working with him on this. This is something he said, look, Tata said he is aware that mistake, he's very aware that mistake could have cost us the game. He feels terrible about it. He's remorseful about it. It's not that he doesn't know. And he said, but I, as the coach, I'm not here to punish him. I don't want to punish him. I want to teach him. I want to develop him. I want him to become the player that I know he can become. But he does need to cut down on those mistakes. And the whole team does, but he in particular does too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Can't be putting your team. I mean, they had the 2-0 lead, but we have literally seen not that long ago a 2-0 lead disappeared in a hurry in a crucial game. Right.
Yes.
Which cost them the trophy.
The other team all of a sudden scored 3 goals in 12 minutes.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you've lost the game, and it lost them the trophy. So, they need to be really careful. A 2-0 lead, you just can't. Playing with 10 men is very different from playing with 11. And that's why this win over Cincinnati was extra impressive. It really was. Not just that they went ahead 2-0 in 6 minutes and Pistolero and all that, but the fact that they were able to hang on. The fact that they were able to hang on with only 10 men was really, really impressive for this team, especially, which has had trouble in the past in those situations.
And it goes back to our ongoing conversation about them on the defensive side too, and how much that needed to get better. 10 or 11 doesn't matter. That aspect of the team needed to get better, and that showed big time in this game to shut out a team as high quality as Cincinnati, especially when and basically you're on how long was it? 60 minutes almost that they were shorthanded.
He went out went out at the 42nd minute, and then they added 9 minutes.
Yeah.
They added 9 minutes to the first half.
69 minutes. Imagine being in almost 70 minutes. Imagine if it was a hockey team on a penalty kill for 70 minutes. Forget about
70 minutes.
Yeah.
Imagine.
That's the equivalent of that.
Or a basketball game that's 4-on-5 for almost, for 2/3 of the game or more. I mean,
and you're playing one of the best teams in the league, one of the best offensive teams in the league on top of that.
Yes. So this was a really, really big win. This was a very, very big win for them. It was. I mean, there are 8 games to go and all that, but this was a really critical win coming off the disappointment of the League's Cup. They really needed to come out and make a big statement. And I think they did. I really do think they made a big statement.
Well, what did they tell Captain America? Get this man a shield. That's the next thing for this team. They want that supporter shield. That's what the quest is now for the next 8 games, is stay on top of the entire league. And the important thing, I know we keep looking at Cincinnati and how they're 8 points ahead, but if you jump over and look at the Western Conference, 4 points ahead of the Galaxy. And that's big, because that's now you're more than 1 game, more than 1 victory ahead of LA. So that's a nice little cushion for that part of it too, assuming everything goes well and they do get to the final. You want to have that. You want to have every type of home field you can, and this team has set itself up now in a great spot to get that if they can pretty much manage not having any sort of major slump down the stretch.
Yeah, because the home field, the way it works here is the team that's the team with the best record gets home field advantage for every round. And if they stay on top, the only game between now and a final, between the beginning of the playoffs and the final, the only game that they would play on the road is the second game of the first round series. The first round is a best 2 out of 3.
Right.
So they would play the first game at home, the second game on the road. If there is if they need to play a third, it would be at home.
Right.
Yeah. Other than that, all of the games for them would be at home. The quarterfinals, the semifinal, and the final. The MLS Cup final would be hosted in the little temporary stadium, which is hard to believe. It's like having the Super Bowl in this little 21,000 seat, Lego set stadium that they've thrown together. I mean, this stadium feels like it was put together. Those pink and gray little things you see in the back, they look like little pink and gray Legos that you could just put it together and take
imagining
apart.
Soccer players going like this, like Lego pieces going like that right now.
With the little construction hat on.
Yeah.
So anyway, they will get home field advantage. If they stay on top, they will have home field advantage for every game but one in the playoffs, it's massive. It's really massive.
Yeah, no, it's a tremendous advantage to have for sure. The bigger question, of course, we say it every week. It's this week's. When's Messi coming back, Michelle?
Where is the GOAT? Why don't we ask Tata and then we'll discuss.
Let's do that.
Let's ask Tata. We have a question for you. What is the deal? What is the latest update on the GOAT? What is the latest update on the GOAT, Lionel Messi? Let's hear it from Tata's mouth himself.
Vamos a empezar con Leo. Todavía no lo vimos en el entrenamiento, no estaba convocado por Argentina, entonces indica que quizás es más serio o no, yo no sé.
No, los tiempos más o menos están. No está entrenando con el grupo, sí, ya sale a campo y está trabajando con los preparadores físicos y va evolucionando bien. No era previsible que no esté con Argentina porque todavía no está en condiciones de jugar, pero seguimos bien.
¿Y hay un estimado?
No hay una fecha estimativa, no, porque ya es empezar a ver cómo él se va sintiendo a medida que va sumando entrenamientos en campo.
So the gist of that was he's progressing, no setbacks, but still no real timetable, no update as far as when exactly he may be able to return. Did I get that right, Michelle?
Yeah, and he said, yeah, pretty much. At the beginning, he said that he's still not training with the group, but he is out on the field, which that is progress.
That's something.
Only been in the gym. He had only been in the gym for 5 weeks. He started with the boot for a few weeks. Then he was out of the boot, but still only in the gym, had not done any work at all on the field. So what Tata said there is that he has begun training on the field with a trainer. He's not training yet with the group, but he's progressing at the pace that, that they are expecting. Also, he was left off the Argentina national team. And I asked, does that mean it's more serious than we thought? He said, no, it was expected that he's not ready to play yet. So, we knew that he wasn't going to play for Argentina because he was not yet in condition to play. Then I said, is there an estimate of when he will? No. There's no estimate, no date yet. But he said, we have to see how he feels. Now that he's training on the field, we have to see how he feels, and that's how we'll know when it's time for him to return. But no set date, the return of Messi. So what I would say, if you were to put me in front of the microphone and ask the same question, when do I think he's going to come back? I don't think he's going to be back for Chicago this weekend, because if he just returned to the field with a trainer last week, one-on-one, he's not going to be ready by this Saturday to have gone through full training with the team, contact drills, and be ready to fly to Chicago and play in a game. What I think is there's a 2-week break after the Chicago game is a FIFA break. That is the break during which he was going to be playing for Argentina. So there's 14 days with no games for MLS at all. They are shutting down for this FIFA break. On September 14th, Inter Miami plays at home against Philadelphia after a 2-week break. My guess, if I had to guess, is that is the more likely time that Messi would return for that Philadelphia game. That would give him 7 games of the regular season to play plus the playoffs.
Yeah, and plus exactly, and that gives him time, for continued treatment, recovery, whatever, and to ramp it up on the field, to start getting a little bit back,
to
get
more
his shape
time
back, get everything going, get his fitness back, really, too, because he's been shelved for so long at this point.
Not only fitness. Tata also talked in another question we asked him. He said the thing that you have to realize with athletes is it's not just getting him back physically, it's mental.
Right.
He said part of it, even though he's Lionel Messi and all that, he has to get his confidence back. He has to feel that he can go out there and play at full speed. And that is also a mental hurdle that an injured athlete has to get over. And you see it all the time in every sport. When athletes are coming off injuries, they're a little bit tentative at the beginning, even if their body is okay. And the trainer and the medical staff is saying, oh, no, he's totally fine. We don't see anything. Everything is good. In his mind, he has to be ready. And that takes some time to go out there and play some drills, play some contact games, play some scrimmages, and then regain the confidence that you lose when you're sitting for such an extended period of time.
Right. You need to get the timing back with your teammates, and that's going to take a while. I mean, I don't care how great he is. There's going to be a little bit of a process there, maybe for a couple games, where he's going to get back, in sync with his teammates. And like you said, mentally himself, that first assist, that first goal, and then it probably will click. But he has to get that to get back to himself and for everything to start clicking again with Suarez and everybody else.
Yeah, and it's really not worth it to risk him for this Saturday. And again, this is not, all the teams are good and all those things, but Chicago is in 13th place. Miami's already clinched a playoff spot. It doesn't mean they're just going to lay down now for the next 8 games, but it's not a critical game that he go and play in Chicago. Chicago has been struggling. They're third from the end in the standings. It's a game that Miami should win without Lionel Messi. They've already beaten Chicago once here at home, without him. So I don't remember if he was with or I think it was without him. So anyway, it's a game that they can win. They don't need to risk him and traveling and all that stuff. All the hoopla that goes into when he plays on the road too. There's all of the, 1,000 fans standing outside the hotel and this and that. To me, it makes more sense to rest him. This week, he can be training. The next 2 weeks, he can be training. And then on September 14th, Philadelphia, if he feels up to it, I think maybe that would be when he returns.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of having, after this 7 games left to go through this bit of a, they're important games for seeding, for home field, all of that. But you almost have like a pseudo bit of a training period again where you can kind of ease him back into it, and then, knock on wood, everything goes well, he doesn't have any setbacks, you're ready to go for the playoffs.
Yeah, it would have been different if they are in 7th place and they're battling to get into the playoffs, and then he would feel pressure too, like, oh my God, I need to get back in there to help this team get into the playoffs, and if I'm not playing, what if we don't make the playoffs again, and that'll be a complete disaster. They're in. So they're in first place. They're in a comfortable position. Again, it doesn't mean that they can just lay down. And Tata was asked, actually, somebody asked him at the press conference after the game, so now that you're in the playoffs, do you think you might rest some players? Do you think you might have some rotation with these games coming up? And he said, no, as long as there are 7 days between games, we're going to put out our strongest team and still we want to stay on top. We don't want to drop. We don't want to slip. As long as there are 7 games. He said if there's a week where there's a midweek game on a Wednesday, maybe they would make a rotation. But as long as there are 7 days between games, he said there's no need to rest players. He wants them to stay in a rhythm that they're in right now and stay on top. So, he doesn't expect to make any big changes for the Chicago game or for any of the games coming up, as long as there are 7 days in between. They want to stay on top right now.
Right. Only way I could see that is if they, if they run the table or close to running the table, and let's say they have a match or 2 left and they've already clinched the Supporters Shield, then maybe.
Right. Yeah.
At that point, it's meaningless. But besides that, I mean, speaking of pressure, let's hear from Drake Callender again about the high stakes of this chase for the MLS Cup.
Last one, which is you guys didn't win the first 2 cups that you wanted to win. Now you have MLS Cup. how much pressure do you guys feel to win this cup? Because, you know, would it feel like a failure if your team doesn't win MLS Cup, considering all that you've done this year and been on top of the standings all year?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we feel any pressure. You know, I think we're just taking it game by game, and you know, if we just have that approach and have that mentality, then you know, we get too far ahead of ourselves, and you know, we lose focus of what our job is every single day and every single game. So, of course, our goals are set super high, and the standards are set super high, and we want to win, and we want to win the Eastern Conference, and we want to win the MLS Cup. But if we don't win, the game is right in front of us, and that won't happen. So I think our focus is just to be grounded where we're at, keep doing what we're doing. Of course, learn from our mistakes and keep competing and staying healthy. I think we'll put ourselves in a good position to do that.
Thank you.
I wanted to throw I wanted to throw in something that Drake had said before that's not on that clip. When he was talking about learning from mistakes, he specifically addressed he didn't, you know, name Thomas Aviles by name or anything like that, but he did address the issue of yellow cards and of having to play a man down and how difficult that is. And he said, we have to learn from our mistakes. And he said, obviously, when a guy gets a red card, it's not intentional. We are aggressive. Our team plays aggressive. We have a certain style, and that's how we are, and we're not going to give that up. But we have to make sure that we don't make mistakes going forward. These mistakes we have to learn from, because he said we are going into very high stakes games coming up, and those kind of mistakes could wind up hurting us a lot more than it did in this game. He said we were able to win this game in spite of it. But he said going forward, we need to cut down on mistakes now that we're going into the most high stakes games and going into the playoffs, because then it becomes critical. And every mistake, you're going to be playing in the playoffs against the best teams, and they will take advantage of your mistakes. And so he stressed the importance of not making mistakes going forward.
Yeah, and you would think, you know, officials are not going to call just anything, and especially in a huge game, in a playoff game, heck, maybe even the championship game, let's say. But you don't want to have that happen. I mean, you imagine you can't go down, you can't have a penalty, a card that puts you at 10 men for 70 minutes. Imagine that happening in a playoff game where
against the Columbus Crew. How about if it's the Eastern Conference Finals? By the way, speaking of the Crew, they won the League's Cup. I don't know if anyone was following the League's Cup, but for the 15 of you who, no, I'm just kidding. Columbus Crew did win the League's Cup, and they beat LAFC. So those are the two teams.
They're clapping.
You know, that Tata keeps talking.
Those are the 15. Those are the 15 people clapping.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I hear them. There they are. No, the LAFC played Columbus Crew. For those who were not paying attention, Columbus Crew played LAFC in the championship game, and they won. And they scored 2 goals in the 90th minute. By the way, they won in a very exciting way. They won games at they scored goals in the last minute, and they won. So they now are the defending MLS Cup champion. They went to the final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and they won the League's Cup. So Columbus Crew, you know that Tata has been raving about this team all season. He loves their coach, Wilfred Nancy. He said, I had it in a story the other day, that he says that in his estimation, the Columbus Crew plays like a team that came from another league, not MLS, which is a little bit of a diss of MLS. It really is. But he said, to me, the Columbus Crew is separate from the rest of the league. They play like a team that came from another league. And he said he gives full credit to their coach, to their manager. So he has the highest regard for that team. And you have to say, when you look, I wanted to point out, Inter Miami has 65 yellow cards this season, which I told you ranks 5th in the league. 65 yellow cards. The Columbus Crew is the most disciplined team in the league. It should be no surprise that the best team in the league is also the most disciplined team in the league. 26 yellows for the whole season. 26 yellow cards versus
less than half.
5 yellow cards for
less
Inter
than
Miami.
half.
That is a big gap. That's a big gap. 65
less
yellow
than half,
cards,
yeah.
26 yellow cards. So that team, Tata said it the other day, the Columbus Crew, forget about the MLS final. Miami is going to have to face the Columbus Crew again in a playoff to even get any further. And the Columbus Crew is the most disciplined team in the league. They won the League's Cup. They are the defending MLS Cup champion. They did what Miami didn't do against Monterrey in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They are a very, very good team. And they beat LAFC, which is the other really good team, and LA Galaxy. So those other three teams are outstanding, in Cincinnati and Miami. That's basically the top five that you're looking at right now.
You almost have to hope that it's almost like they're going to have to play 2 MLS Cup caliber championship level games to win this thing, because they're going to have to face one of them, whether it's Cincinnati or Columbus. You hope they beat each other up if they meet before they'd have to meet Inter Miami, maybe, and not have to go through both of them to get there, depending on how the seedings fall and all of that.
Right.
But
bracket
I mean,
goes
through them, and then you'd have to go through one of the LAs theoretically to win the whole thing. I mean, it's
LA Galaxy. They're both really good. LA Galaxy and LAFC, which is a great rivalry out there going on. And those teams are outstanding out west. So this is not going to be a cakewalk, even though Miami has been on top all season, except maybe a 1 week period there where Cincinnati leapfrogged them. They've been on top of the standings pretty much the whole season. They have a cushion supporter shield, whatever you want to say. But when it comes down to a do or die elimination game, they have in front of them, Columbus Crew is very good. Cincinnati's good. LAFC and LA Galaxy, those are tough teams.
Yeah. Saturday night, 8:30 at Soldier Field against Chicago. Check it out. I mean, that's we're not hyping that game up. As you said, Chicago's not one of the playoff caliber teams right now, but it's an important 3 points to pick up, because if you have to stay on top, like they keep saying, and this team needs to be, more disciplined and fewer cards to get this thing done. But a lot of interesting things to go over, and we'll do it again next week. Michelle and I will be back for another episode of Inside Inter Miami. We'll recap what happened at Chicago and how this team, again, proceeded without Messi, more than likely, and tried to get another 3 points. Did they get them or not? And we'll be back to review where they're at. But for now, thank you for watching as always. Thank you for listening. Remember, you can catch us. You can catch Michelle doing that on YouTube or at MiamiHerald.com. Catch all of her work at MiamiHerald.com. And we will see you all next week. Enjoy the games, everybody.